Well, welcome back, folks, to our Advocacy 101 series. And I'm here again with Leslie Bruce. If this is the first time you're checking in, please look at our first recording where we go over the basics of advocacy. And Leslie tells a little bit about herself and her background. Very important before you watch this. I think that you'll learn more and remember more if you start from the beginning. So, all right. Well, good morning again, Leslie.
Good
Glad
morning
to have
again.
you here again. So during our first session, we talked about why advocacy is important, what is advocacy, and how do you get started, right? So now in this second session, we're going to dig deeper into, all right, I'm an advocate, I have my cause, now I'm preparing to do my first visit, be it here locally or in Washington, D.C., so we're just going to talk about the nitty-gritty of everything you need to do to prepare so you're not as scared as I was when I first did it. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, well, it's a lot easier than people think, so this may be a short video.
All right, short. Well, so in your experience, Leslie, just going back to the last time you were up in D.C., what were the prep stuff that you would do to get yourself ready and get your students ready? Because I know you take students up to D.C.
I do. You know, what I would like to do is encourage people, you know, very few go to D.C., but all...
They take pictures.
Yes, but all legislators have a local office. And
Oh,
so
there you go.
I really encourage people to start building a relationship locally before they ever need it. Right. So it's, you know, we're talking again about relationship building, and so what you want is to call again. You can do this to the DC office too, but I'm just going to assume that if you're a beginner, let's say you're working with your HIMSS committee, and you are going to be responsible for setting up a meeting with your particular personal legislator. So what you're going to do is call that office. You go to the website, not hard to find, even if you just Google the name of your representative, and we can talk later about how you can find out who that is. But the Secretary of State's office, or you can actually go to one of the federal House or Senate websites, put in your address, find out who your legislator is.
Okay.
Once you pull up their homepage, usually at the bottom will be the offices that they have.
Contact us section.
Yeah. It'll just list the office and address and phone number, and some legislators, depending on how big the territory, will have more than one office, and you want to pick the one closest to you, obviously.
Sure.
You're going to call that office and ask for the scheduler.
Aha. Okay.
Ask for the scheduler. Now, see, people wouldn't necessarily know to do that.
No, I didn't know that. So when I would call the office, I would ask for the congressperson or the senator, and of course the answer is always be, they're busy. Who are you again?
That's right.
So so scheduler, very important.
For the scheduler.
Ask for the scheduler.
Once in a while, they will say, oh, the scheduler's in D.C.
Right.
Here's their number or whatever, or their scheduler's in Sacramento or whatever, the state capital that you're working with. So you get the scheduler. They may or may not be available. Frequently, they're not. You leave a voicemail, let's say. But before you get transferred into their voicemail, what you want to do is be sure you know their name and the spelling of their name. So you get that from the person who answered the phone.
Okay.
You leave a message, and you tell in the voicemail, you say, I'm going to follow up with an email with all the details of my request.
Okay, guys, you're getting the behind the scenes here. I didn't know about this. I wish I knew about this earlier. So this is really important stuff of how to get through, because that's one of the biggest challenges I've had. You make a phone call, you reach out, you don't hear back. So thank you.
So, you know, the fact of it is, you want to call to get the information about who the scheduler is, but you really have a better opportunity to present yourself in writing. Through an email, you're succinct, you're tight, you're able to be your best in your writing, because you have a chance to reflect.
You can edit it.
Exactly. I mean, succinct is the key word to everything in this field. So now that you have the person's name, it is easy to figure out the email convention or format that you would use. If, let's say, it's a House member, then it's going to be firstname.lastname@mail.house.gov.
Right.
So let's just assume then I'm writing to the scheduler for a member of Congress.
Okay.
So I use that convention. I write request for meeting in the subject line, and anything else compelling I can say from hymns or something that they would go, oh wow, pay attention.
Right.
And then I make a very tight, succinct, compelling, not to me, compelling to them, request for a meeting and explain why. Why this is good. We have, and if you can put the number of members that are located in the district that you kind of visit, there are this many members of our organization in your district. We'd like to just acquaint you with the organization and what we do, and see how we can help you make decisions and that relate to health IT. And then I give them my contact information, obviously the email, but I give them my cell phone usually, number for them to call. And that way, not only have I called, they've heard my voice, I've sent them an email, so I'm reliable, I followed up, they can see concisely, they have something that they can print out. Frequently, schedulers sit with the chief of staff, and they go over this pile of requests, and they decide what they're going to do. Well, this one's going to have to be staff, this one's going to be the legislator, this one's going to be, wherever, and they put the calendar together. And you want to make it easy for them to have the details in front of them and not having to copy it out of a voicemail, kind of thing. Right.
Now, there's a lot going on here. I'm trying to break it down in my head. So you mentioned the scheduler. So very important, make that connection with the scheduler, get the right information, make a compelling argument. You also mentioned chief of staff. So I know there's a lot of people helping behind the scenes. Do you mind kind of going into just high level, what do these people do?
The chief of staff tends to coordinate everything, coordinate all the other staff. So they are basically the staff director, the number 2 person to the legislator, him or herself.
Oh, wow.
So that's a very important position. And if you have an opportunity to meet with them, any staff person, let me put that as a former staffer. Let me get right out there that do not think that you have been somehow, been given second-rate attention if you meet with staff, especially initially. Staff can make or break your issue and whether or not it ever sees the light of day with that legislator. So you want to have a good relationship with staff and build that. Legislative aides, at least, legislative aides in state or federal tend to be the ones who are shepherding different issue areas and legislation related to those. So if a legislator has committee assignments, that's where they're going to spend the most of their time and attention on those issues. But they still have staff, legislative aides usually, who cover other issues. Now, frequently these people, particularly in a district office, have a responsibility for knowing the community really well and attending community meetings so that there's a lot of community outreach to their job if they are in the district office. So you may see, field representatives.
I was about to ask, what's the difference between that and a field representative? Are they kind of the same?
They're kind of the same, and people use different terminology, but the job descriptions are very, very close. And then of course you have your schedule and your in your administrative, supports, that kind of thing.
All right, so we have the scheduler. You definitely want to have a relationship with that person so you can get well on the schedule. You have the chief of staff, who's basically the main orchestrator behind the scenes and making sure everything flows. And you also have the field representative, legislative aides, that are out there getting the issues, making sure that they have the pulse for the community.
Right. They are the legislative aides and these community folk. They're the real issue experts.
Issue experts. There you go. Oh, okay. So that would explain why when we meet up in D.C., they would say, "Oh, this is our legislative aid for healthcare." Okay, now it makes sense. I'm still learning, guys. So glad Leslie here. So one of the things I want to ask you, you mentioned creating a compelling argument for them to talk to you, not from your standpoint, but from their standpoint. I know it's a loaded question, but how do you do that?
Well, again, we go back to know your product, and by that I mean know your legislator. And now that we have the internet, I shouldn't even say that because most people have always had it, but it is so easy to research your legislator. Research, their websites are robust for the most part. You can, read op-eds they've written, white papers. That's really not a great word, but they're opinion pieces on various legislation. You can look at your community newspaper. those weeklies are pretty amazing to help you know what they're thinking. But if you look, particularly research the internet about where they stand on certain things, you can see what motivates them. They might have a child with autism and you can relate to that, or they might be a sailor and you can relate to that. You're trying to find commonality. For instance, one of our students this past summer, her legislator was supportive of fossil fuels, and she was there to encourage him away from that, and yet she found during her research that he was a big proponent of biofuels.
Oh, wow.
And so she was able to talk about biofuels, not about fossil, but about bio. And so that's the kind of thing you're going to research them and so once you know who they are, you have a better sense of what their values are, and you can appeal to those.
So one of the things I struggle with is trying to represent the organization, right, when you're writing these letters, and also putting in your own personal flavor into it, especially if you're one of their constituents. You want to tell them, this is what's important to me as one of your constituents.
Absolutely.
How do you make that balance so it's not about Ian, it's about HIMSS?
Well, I think if you're working with an organization and you're an advocate for an organization, you really need to be able to represent that organization. And I would encourage everyone to just vet what they're doing with their HIMSS staff or whatever organization, the staff that works on these kinds of things. But you're absolutely right. It has to be personal also, because you really can only influence terribly effectively your own legislators. And to have a personal story, that carries the day. I mean, I tell students you need to have rational and emotional messages. And so rational is all the data and that kind of thing, and supportive, and you still have to be succinct. But that emotional message about why this matters to you, believe me, that's what gets them. That's what gets us all. So you have to include that. I think you just have to make sure that you're appropriately representing the organization, and yet adding to that with your own experience.
Okay. Well, my last question would be about how do you, so we talked about prepping before the visit. How do you also prep either the chief of staff or the legislator about your organization? So I've seen a lot of people just, send a slew of emails or send them to websites. How do you how do you prepare them for you so that they know more about you?
Well, I really don't prepare them before the first meeting, because that's counterproductive. What I want to do, I do enough of a compelling who I am so that they'll bother to meet with me. I've got to give them something. But again, you want to start building the relationship before you need it. So to do that, you want to go introduce yourself. You want to introduce your organization. And some of the HIMSS advocacy members on our committee we have gone to the legislator saying, we just wanted you to know who we are, what HIMSS is, what we do, and that's your prep. That's your prep. Okay, so next time you go in, they're already familiar with the organization, who you are, how many members of your organization are in their district, and then you just build from there.
Okay. So this is why you were asking about how many do we have in the district before we meet. Now I see the connection.
It's so compelling to say, we have 500 members in your district.
And then they know, okay, that translates into potential voters in my district that keep me where I am.
Bingo.
So last question, we talked about preparing for it. We talked about getting the relationship, and I love that quote. Build a relationship before you need it. That is so Sun Tzu, Art of War-ish. I love it. So do you think about materials to leave behind, or is that something?
I do. Okay. I certainly do. It used to be that people would bring binders and folders and pockets folders and refer people to books and all of this stuff. It's never going to happen, people. We live in a blink, 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 blink world. So one page, usually one side, and if you can't get your ask, a little bit of background, your 3 key messages, and a little bit about your organization and why this is important to you, or why this fits the mission. In one page, you're not working hard enough.
Right.
Do you remember the old quote? I think it was Mark Twain.
Mark Twain, yeah.
He said, I would have wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one.
Yes,
well, you take the time to make a one-page leave behind.
Right.
You do not want to be folders and binders, they're just going to go into the trash.
Yes, and I was actually up in D.C. when they were switching offices, and they said, hey, Ian, send me this in email because it's going to go to the pile. And I'm like, wow, we spent a lot of time on that. Well, to your point, you only have so much time. And when they see that
you want them to read it.
Yeah, when I see like 14 pages, they don't even bother at that point. So stick to the one page, succinct message.
Less is more.
Less is more. And I'll say it again, build the relationships before you need it. Leslie, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Right. Hope you guys learned something new about advocacy, and we'll see you soon. Bye.